Warm lunch and learn, and hope that today's content will be really interesting to you. So we're focusing today on the neighbourhood approach and the development of local action groups and action plans. So for those of you who may be new to JUMP, just a very brief overview. Apologies to those of you who've heard this before, but I think it's important we just share a brief overview. So JUMP is a place-based physical activity programme funded by Sport England, one of 12 local delivery pilots funded to test and learn the tackling of inactivity, really. We take a whole systems approach, and our aim has been to improve the health and well-being of children and young people. It's a collaborative approach, and these are some of the many partners we worked with, but see, these are the key partners. And Active Bradford is the charitable trust that lead the work. Born in Bradford are one of our key research partners with the University of Bradford. So just to say a bit about the work we're going to talk about today, our focus was very much on reducing inequalities. We worked in an area of Bradford with a population of 30,000 children, and 2/3 of our children were not active enough to benefit their health. That when you start to look at gender and at ethnicity, however, the inequalities were even starker. So girls were less active than boys, and our South Asian and multi-ethnic communities less active than our white British. South Asian girls, only 6% of our South Asian girls were active enough to benefit their health. So we really passionately focused on reducing inequalities. So this gives a bit of a very kind of overview of the JUMP model. So we worked with individual children and families, communities, organisations, made changes to the environment, and embedded physical activity in policy and strategy over a 5-year period in our initial test and learn phase. And we had 15 work streams. And obviously today we're talking about particularly the local action plans and the local action groups that delivered them. So we undertook a controlled trial, and the results of that controlled trial were the biggest, most impactful difference made in children's physical activity levels on a population level study ever seen globally. And there's lots and lots more information on our resource hub, which we'll share the link to tell you more about the programme, the 14 work streams and the research. But we made, in very simple terms, a 70-minute improvement in children's physical activity per week compared to children outside of the JUMP area. And we reduced inactivity by over 22 minutes a day on the weekends, which for a very disadvantaged community was a huge kind of wonderful outcome that we weren't even sure, particularly beyond school, we would make. But the changes were made both within school and within the community. So the key take-homes of our research shows that this whole system approach is more effective than a single or multi-component intervention, and it fostered long-term change, unlike lots of other interventions. And we're still really looking into that research and writing papers and sharing learning, but one of the emerging evidence from it is the importance of green space for improving children's physical activity, particularly their moderate to vigorous physical activity. So that's a whistle-stop tour, as I say, loads more on our resource hub. And I'd like now to hand over to Cami Sadiq to talk about our JUMP neighbourhood approach.
Thank you, Jan. So I'm Cami Sadiq. I'm the current operations director for Active Bradford. My previous role was community engagement manager, so really heavily involved in the JUMP neighbourhood approach. We didn't reinvent the wheel. We used the assets around us. We kind of created a bit of a blueprint to how to approach neighbourhood working, place-based working, and this is one of the models that we came up with. So as you can see, there's a number of key components to neighbourhood approaches, and we kind of wanted to centre stuff around a green space, a potential playful, active green space, and have different elements kind of feeding into that central green space. So active faith settings were a key part of it. So that was developing a work within mosques and madrasas. Our makeup and demographic in Bradford is that there's a large majority of South Asian children. Many of them, almost 90% of them, actually go to a mosque and a madrasa at the end of a school day. So it kind of made sense to have that captive audience and work within the faith settings. We also have the Creating Active Schools programme, which has been developed with a number of experts who created this framework for working within schools, engaging with across the school system, the community leaders within schools, parents, children, young people. And that kind of is a whole systems approach to changing behaviours and ways of working within school settings. In and amongst that, we had active and playful streets. So we did some key work in alleyways and active routes to and from schools and faith settings. And we did things like chalk walks and treasure hunts, just to make the kind of community feel as though it is better connected. As well as the local organisations that are statutory organisations, we connected with the huge voluntary and community sector within Bradford. So many of them community organisations that work within place already, that have long-standing, deep-rooted connections to them communities, were a key component in making sure that the neighbourhood approach worked. As well as that, we have some, what I would say, interventions, and these interventions came in the form of our staff team. So we have community engagement managers, we have jump connectors, and we also had a social marketing and communications campaign, which ran through as a bit of a golden thread to, again, connect everybody up and kind of share positive news stories, because it was identified at a really early stage that actually, for example, perceptions of safety was really important for communities, and we kind of wanted to shift the narrative for the local community. Next slide, please, Jan. So just a little bit more about what the community engagement managers did and who the jump connectors were. Now, I'm acutely aware that this programme, this next phase of Sport England funding, means that there's a bit of a reduced financial, I suppose, package. But we tried wherever possible to make things very cost effective. So our community engagement managers really focused on developing, helping to understand how to co-deliver, co-design an action plan that would be delivered by the community themselves. So the community engagement managers really connected that system up together, and they played a key role in facilitating the local action groups to develop a plan. In and amongst that, we had jump connectors. Many of our jump connectors were local people, people who were really engaged within their communities, that understood the issues, that could come up with solutions. And the jump connectors, you can see, if we as community engagement managers were the cogs, the jump connectors were definitely the oil that kind of kept that machine moving. So their main roles was to build confidence amongst families, the people that they already knew, going into schools and kind of doing coffee mornings and really helping to build the capacity of the local community. Much of their work was around the green spaces, so they coordinated many of them activities in local green spaces, in schools, in community organisations, and they helped to build links with the kind of between schools and green spaces, as well as the wider community kind of ecosystem, I suppose. Next slide, please. So we worked with 11 neighbourhoods, 5 in the initial, 3 in the initial instance. So we had direct delivery neighbourhoods that were led by 3 community engagement workers. You can see from this very complicated map that the blue areas included Ollerton and Lower Grange, and the blue areas were the direct delivery neighbourhoods. I'm getting confused because it's like there's so many neighbourhoods. So initially we worked in the pioneer neighbourhoods, of course, pioneering, Ollerton and Low Grange, Scotchman Road and Peel Park. And then we worked into 3 other neighbourhoods, Windhill, Bolton Wood, Swain House, Fagley, Ravenscliffe, Thorpe Edge, as well as Manningham. And then we had some interesting work in two other neighbourhoods, which were the commissioned neighbourhoods. So we actually, like I said earlier, we came up with this blueprint, this way of working within neighbourhoods, and we commissioned it out to local organisations to deliver that plan, which had quite a lot of success. It was really an opportunity for us to test a way of kind of stepping back from communities and enabling local organisations to deliver on their own accord. So how do we identify these neighbourhoods? Bradford is such a big area. I think it's the fourth biggest metropolitan district across the UK. So we chose to eat the elephant in small chunks. Neighbourhoods were identified through various means. So we looked at IMD data, we looked at health data, we also looked at any of the other kind of interventions that are in place. And we came up with a number of neighbourhoods. We had a long list, which became a short list, and then finally we ended up with these neighbourhoods. So that was a 3 to 6 month kind of project, desk based mainly, but we also went out and spoke to a lot of people to build them initial relationships. We also worked quite closely with our landscape team in the council, and we identified some green spaces where we could potentially develop new opportunities for young people and their families to engage with. Next slide. So once these neighbourhoods were identified, we were really conscious that we didn't want to create a new system. We didn't want to create new borders and boundaries that don't exist within communities. So it was very fluid. We got a group of stakeholders together, and them stakeholders represented many different organisations as well as local people. And we kind of set the seed and started developing them partnerships by utilising these three key things. So we had some really large maps. The community members and the stakeholders were able to identify some of the key assets within their areas. Assets includes physical assets, but also people. Who are the key actors within a neighbourhood that can make things happen? Who are those that influence policies? Who are the people that influence families? And also working on things that we can actually control rather than having an open discussion about everything. We kind of honed in on some of the things that we can actually change as part of the local action plans. Next slide, please, Jan. So these neighbourhood action groups included our local community and voluntary sector partners. As I've mentioned previously, the primary schools, secondary schools, some of the senior leaders within them organisations, so the people that actually make the decisions, frontline staff, local faith settings. Another key one that came up was anybody that was delivering kind of physical activity and sports in a structured way. So a lot of the local football clubs, cricket clubs, and so on, they were asked to be involved. And then finally, the Friends of Parks group. So we had already on board our local authority partners, but there are some kind of informal groups that look after parks, and they were really key in their voice around what can happen within a green space. The local authority was a really key partner for us. So very different to many of the places in the new expansion for Sport England. We were actually a membership group. So there was a few key partners that were leading on this work that we did in Bradford. So we had to engage with many of the local authority departments. We were really lucky to have really good engagement from the local ward officers, youth workers, play workers, parks teams, active travel teams, and of course elected members, which takes its own kind of time to relationship build with. Next slide, please. So these groups formulated a local action plan. Now, to come up with this local action plan, we know is a difficult task. We know that there's many things that obviously people from different areas have as a priority. So we came up with a kind of co-designed approach to delivering within neighbourhoods. The idea being that we would facilitate as Jump and as Active Bradford, and that these partners would deliver themselves. We would be able to facilitate with enabling meetings, connecting people up to the system, but also providing some resource to be able to deliver some of them projects. Now, we had a system of voting for what was important, what were the things that we could actually influence, and the groups met on a regular basis to look at this action plan and really think about how we encourage projects that increase physical activity for children, people and their families. Within this action plan, we had up to 10 to 15 projects. Them projects ran over the course of 2 years. Many of them were kind of short-term projects, but none of them were actually as short-term as 3 months, because we identified early on that for this to be long-term and sustainable, that these projects would have to be really embedded within the communities. We also had a period at the end of the local action plans where we had an embed and sustain, and I'll talk a little bit later on about what that meant for us. So I mentioned that we resourced some of the work. So this was a process which kind of changed and changed over time. We initially funded local groups through the Jump Awards, which were essentially grants that were given to the organisations. But what we found is that actually it needed a bit more focus. We ended up going down the route of actually commissioning local community groups and partners to deliver pieces of work. It kind of enabled us to have a key person, a leader that would take the project forward. So it worked really well. Also, as part of the commissioning, it was decided that actually the whole group should decide who gets the commission. So we have now moved to a system where we put forward the proposals, and then the group decide whether it's the right thing to do or not the right thing to do. There's an opportunity to ask questions, but it really makes it feel like it's part of theirs. They own this local action plan, and they're able to deliver as a collective. Many of the organisations we worked with obviously have a good track record. Sorry, Jen, just go back to the last slide. I'll be quick as possible. So many of them had long track records of being able to deliver within communities, and we certainly didn't want to be seen as an organisation, and this is really important, and I hope this is the one takeaway from today, that we parachute into a community and do loads of great stuff with lots of positive kind of life experiences and then disappear, creating these vacuums within communities. So we really honed in on that asset-based community development approach, where this is yours and you own this and you will continue it beyond the scope of Jump or Active Bradford or any of the other places that are on the call today. Thank you, Jan. I think we're going to pop over to a film. Sorry, Jan, I don't know if anybody else can hear you or not, but I certainly can't. How do we take an individual from a journey from A to B, where they're moving more, they're living longer? We're basically engaging children and families in physical activity in different settings.
We're working within 8 neighbourhoods to deliver Jump, and central to the neighbourhood approach is the development of local action plans.
The local action plans come from the Jump action groups.
Within each neighbourhood, a community engagement manager brings together a group of stakeholders that represent the neighbourhood or the assets within that neighbourhood. School stakeholders, local community groups, Islamic religious setting stakeholders.
Today was a JAG meeting. All the partners get together to share experiences and see how far we got, a bit of catch up and everything in regards to what we've done over the period of 2-3 months.
We have to look at assets that are already based in them communities. Some are institutions that have been there for 50, 100 years. So rather than recreating the wheel, we use what's already out there in the community. And we've developed these smaller kind of hyper-local neighbourhoods.
And they'll go through a series of 3 workshops in order to co-design the local action plan for that neighbourhood.
Within them workshops, we work out what the barriers are to physical activity for local communities and families.
So we want them to think really kind of blue sky thinking as to what would they like on this action plan, but then get them to think really critically about those things.
After the 3 sessions, we will have a skeleton plan. Within the plan, we usually have 10 to 15 objectives, and them objectives are pretty much an individual project.
One of the ideas that the Swindy Woods group came up with was using community centres to provide physical activity opportunities, and that's one of the ideas that had quite a lot of votes. So the research team were tasked with going away and looking at the evidence about that idea. We conduct something called a rapid review for each of the ideas that had quite a lot of votes and that they wanted to take forward. And the purpose of that rapid review is to look at what's out there about what's worked and what's not worked, so that we can bring that evidence from research and evidence from practice back to the group. So that information the group can then use to consider, do we want to take this idea forward or not? And if we do we want to refine the idea based on what we know about how it's worked before? The JUMP action groups are able to apply to some community funds that are available through JUMP. One of those funds is a neighbourhood action plan fund. So the idea is that stakeholders within the neighbourhood can put in applications to that fund to receive money and resource to deliver items from the action plan.
We provide some of the resource and the support, and they go out and they deliver themselves.
So now at Windhill Community Centre, there's a range of activities happening, things like ping pong and archery.
We've maybe been the catalyst for some of that collaboration that's taken place within Bradford. So we're entering a new era of active communities and neighbourhoods in Bradford, where local people and organisations are working together to improve the lives of children and families through physical activity.
Can people hear me now? Can you hear my voice? Excellent, fantastic, great. So I hope that brought to life really a lot of what Camille was communicating before about the neighbourhood approach and the local action groups. And now just to say a little bit more about the co-design process really for the workshops that we took part to create those local action plans. Because we spent 5 years, in my previous role I was the director of the JUMP programme and saw this as a really central part of the work we were doing, was to kind of have a really well-owned and co-designed plan. So I'm just going to briefly talk through the 3 workshops in a little bit more detail. So at the very beginning, we felt that building trusted relationships and motivation was absolutely key. So we put some effort into that, and we used kind of active breaks as one of our ways to actually model physical activity in a fun, playful way. So for example, instead of a long PowerPoint around the benefits of physical activity with all the evidence, we actually got the groups coming up with all of the ideas they could think of and then sharing them through throwing a beach ball across to each other to share back. And just simple things like that were kind of very good for relationship building and creating a kind of positive ethos. Cami mentioned earlier about the barriers and enablers. We worked in a way where this was an exercise that we did with the group. So our community engagement managers shared to the group the findings from the mapping of the neighbourhood, what assets we found, insight from children and young people, and then the groups themselves really thought about what they see as the barriers in their area and what can help communities be active. And that process sparked the development of those initial action ideas. The other thing that we wanted a shared understanding about across the group was taking a behaviour change approach, because we had tasked ourselves with absolutely, we needed to make sure that the work of JUMP was as sustainable as possible. And a behaviour change approach has sustainability really kind of baked into it. So we used the COM-B behaviour change model, which is simply about saying we need to make sure that we build people's capability, opportunities and motivation if we want to change behaviour. And by the group, again, they did an exercise which brought this quite abstract idea to life by sharing together, looking at case studies of children and applying this to that individual child. And so there's a really good buy-in to the idea of behaviour change, and we sort of brought it to life in quite a practical way. Having done all of that, it put them in a position where they were much more able to start to really come up with actions that would be sustainable, and then together collaboratively to vote on what they'd like to look at taking forward. So as you saw in the film, between the second workshop and the third workshop, our research team went away and took those ideas and looked at what was the evidence that they would work. I just want to say that obviously most people don't have a full research team. We were in a very privileged position to have that. But actually in our commissioned out neighbourhoods, we worked with our neighbourhood teams, and just using Google Scholar and search engines, they managed to undertake that light touch process of just looking at what evidence there was around the different ideas. So it has been transferable into a much more low cost, cost effective way of doing that. Once those ideas have come back to the group, in that third workshop, they really dug into thinking about how can we make sure that they are actually affordable, practical, that they're going to be effective, that they are going to be acceptable to our community. So a lot of time was taken to think through those and to whittle down from a larger number of actions to a final collaborative vote on what those actions would be, and then who was going to actually lead to take each action forward. So we've got on our resource hub, we've just posted a workshop plan. So if you're interested in the detail, then there's more that can be found there, and we'll put the link to that in the chat. Another thing to say, alongside much wider research, such as the controlled trial, one of the parts of research that really was very effective was ripple effect mapping, which is a way of drawing what the wider, what both the intended and the unintended impact of a project or a program has over time. It's a kind of participatory approach. And I think the thing about it, which was a big surprise to us, was that actually our groups really liked that a lot of research is quite onerous, and it's actually, hard to get that buy-in from community partners about sort of, long questionnaires or focus groups. But ripple effect mapping was really well received, and it seemed to definitely enhance the motivation of people, because they started to be able to see what was working and recognize and realizing the progress and successes that were being made. So I'm going to hand back to Cami just to say a bit more about, obviously we had plenty of challenges along the way. Getting everybody in a room was often very difficult. We've actually taken workshop 1 and 2 in our current new 3 neighbourhoods, and we've put them on the same day in a 4-hour block, because actually people are very busy. The capacity is an issue, and actually bringing them together 3 times to co-design a plan actually proved to be quite difficult. So we now do a longer day, a 4-hour session, and followed by a few weeks later that final third workshop. All through 5 years of testing and learning, I'm just going to hand over to Cami to say about what worked, what we found did work.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. I think one of our key learning points were at the point of COVID. We obviously were in full swing of 3 neighbourhoods at that point, and we kind of tested stuff online and really came to a quick conclusion that it just wasn't as engaging as it would have been in a face-to-face setting. And what we found over the last maybe 4 or 5 years is actually when people come face-to-face, you really get that opportunity to do some of the networking. The approach becomes really real. It's not just a plan that sits on a spreadsheet somewhere, but actually people are really engaged with that. And that was really important for us to really harness them face-to-face workshops, allow people to come to a community venue. Some of the kind of unintended outcomes of that were simply people knew where things were. They got to know where local community centres were. School leaders were telling us that they didn't even know that these things happened within the community. So it was really important for us to have that. Some of the other things within the Jump Action groups that we've learned is the piece around celebrating success, and the ripple effect map was really a good vehicle to enable that to happen. So they kind of acted as updates, and these are the things we've done, and this is where we've connected. Because much of the time when somebody's really engaged with the delivery side, that moment to reflect and to see what kind of things they've done doesn't really come across too often. So that was important that we allowed the opportunity for people just to step back and see what they've done within the Jump Action groups. We doubled up on a kind of knowledge and understanding of what's going on within the system via email updates. So we had regular updates to partners about the things that are happening. This kind of just allowed things to stay live and kind of top of the agenda. Obviously, we were meeting on a 6 to 8 week period, so lots of things can happen within that time frame, especially within schools. We kind of try to fit them in during that kind of half terms and so on and so forth. And then we finally had a definite kind of push on solution focused approach. This is not about ignoring the issues that are in communities. This is not about kind of burying our heads in the sand in terms of problems. But this is about looking outwardly and kind of how do we, as a very kind of influential group of people, have solutions to some of the issues that we have within communities. So yeah, some of the key ingredients that I've already touched on. Regular meetings were really important, and there were meetings beyond the local action group. So a lot of the time when there was a project going on, we had smaller kind of subgroups that met to deliver a piece on one of the plans. We had quite a few community of learning events where across neighbourhoods we brought people together just to share good practice, to celebrate success. Really nice opportunity for people to learn off each other and kind of celebrate what they did. In terms of the two interventions, research-wise, that really landed well within communities. Obviously, it's a different world to what organisations are used to delivering. We had the ripple effect map that Jan's already mentioned, and we also had a balanced scorecards, which were a really simplified version of an evaluation where they could write about what the successes have been, what things they would change, why things have happened. So really understanding a project and ensuring that it could be better moving forwards. Finally, the last two, obviously the action plans were delivered, but we had a regulated action plan just so we could follow through on any things that were in red or in amber, how other people could connect into that and support the delivery of that action. And then finally, we've mentioned this a couple of times, access to resource and funding. And again, really aware that we want to make things as cost effective as possible. So the piece around the mapping and understanding what's already out there, what resources are already available, and how we could kind of double up on that or do some match funding or work out different ways of being able to raise funds to deliver the projects on the action plan. Yeah, so just a little bit about the embed and sustain phase. Typically at the end of a program, we were really conscious again that right at the start we should think about the exit, and sometimes that's quite a scary place for organisations and for ourselves to say that actually we're not going to be here in 2 years, 2.5 years time. So what of these programs can actually sustain, can continue long term? So we looked at varying ways of being able to kind of increase capacity of organisations to apply for their own funding, to use some of the learning and the data from the research to talk about the impact of their work, really allowing our local organisations to look at charging, whether that was appropriate or not, looking at really sustainable ways of continuing programmes beyond the scope of Jump. We are now in the full swing of developing a universal offer. This universal offer, we always thought was something that we would kind of be, that would be a top up or an add-on, but actually looking at it now, the universal offer is a key part of being able to sustain some of the work that we're doing within neighbourhoods. This wasn't about a universal offer for Jump and what Jump is delivering. This is more about a universal offer across the district, across organisations for children, young people and their families. So, you know, everybody is connected into what is it that we're delivering across the district. And then finally, partners kind of pledged. We had a pledge, physical activity pledge. We're doing some of that work as part of our physical activity strategy group at policy level, but also down at local level. Do community organisations, do faith settings, do schools really see physical activity as an important piece? The answer generally is yes. So they all signed up to a pledge. We give out certificates, and it kind of across the board enabled leaders and decision makers to say, yeah, we're going to do this, so we're going to stick to doing this from now on. I'm just going to quickly pass over to Sonia, who's our community engagement manager, worked in Manningham, and she's going to talk about a specific example within one of our neighbourhoods.
Thanks, Cami. Hi, everybody. Talking and continuing the conversation around sustainability. When we go into neighbourhoods, we know that particularly areas of low affluence, that there's a level of community development that we need to do in order to build that capability, make people aware of the opportunity to be physically active, but also create that motivation to continue to be active. So we used the Comp B model to do that. So I'm going to give you a bit more sort of in-depth detail about what we did over in Manningham. Now, in terms of building capability, we took a community-led approach, so we supported existing provisions and existing groups, and one of them was the development of the Friends of group that enabled the local residents to take more of an active role in shaping local priorities in their communities. This group was already set up, and we supported them to continue once we had exited from that neighbourhood. Building on some of the strong community partnerships, we already had the Jump Action Group that was set up. However, before we went into that neighbourhood, we realised that a lot of those agencies that were quite closely situated were not operating together, or they weren't working together. So we really strengthened that resolve and that partnership with lots of local schools, the faith settings, the community organisations that Cami mentioned earlier on. That led to the increased collaboration of projects, but also the use of the facilities at those sites, particularly within the schools and the faith settings, and went on to lots of joint events and activities, including summer activities, half events, and lots of other things. Local building of capacity, we enabled and supported the development of the active travel hub. Now, this was a key priority that came back from the action plan that was co-created with the Jump Action Group partners. And once we'd exited, they were able to continue those conversations and take back the feedback that they were getting from the communities, and were then successful in securing funding to be able to create an active travel hub at Drummond Field, which was also the site that we developed the green space in at the time. One of our key partners and leaders on the Connector programme was Manningham Housing Association. Now, off the back of the 2-year working intensively within Manningham and with that particular organisation, they went on to make lots of changes from an organisational perspective, and actually went on to create a whole dedicated team of community development and engagement managers or officers who have continued the work at a community level. The impact of building that capability is the communities and partners have greater skills, the confidence is there, the ownership to lead those activities and drive that change, drive the change locally and independently is created. Increased opportunities. So we did, in terms of improvement of the environments, we enhanced and created 2 brand new spaces. One was co-created with around 50 children from the local primary schools, and the other development at Drummond was co-created with young girls who lived and went to the local schools of faith settings. And that created an opportunity for them to be able to access the local green space, to be physically active, to play, and to have active learning sessions on site as well. The impact of this, that more children and young people, families have now an inclusive space, accessible locally, to continue embedding physical activity as part of their everyday life. Next slide, please. Thank you. And creating motivation, there was increased awareness of the benefits of physical activity through our children and families physical activity training. Young people progressed from participants to volunteers through that process, so helping them to now go on to actually volunteer and help to run local sessions. And we developed through this whole program local champions. So anybody we engaged with, whether it be from a community organizational perspective, from the young people or the children within the schools and the faith settings, we always saw that as an opportunity to create those young leaders for tomorrow to continue promote and support and champion physical activity. And that is the impact would be that young people are not only taking part in that activity, but they're now helping, leading and sustaining that locally. So just to sum that up, building capability is friends of groups were established, the Jump Action Group partnerships were developed, the Active Travel Hub went on to be created, and the impact on Manningham Housing and their teams. The increased opportunities were created through the development of the green spaces and the improvements that we made locally. Schools and faith settings and the community organisations are now using those spaces regularly for active learning and outdoor play. And the increased motivation, again, making them aware of the impact and the benefits of physical activity, the young people that have gone into volunteering and supporting those sessions locally, and the residents that were able to take ownership and empowered to continue that work locally. That's resulted in some behaviour change where we can see that once we've exited that neighbourhood, those local champions, whether it be community, children, young people, or from an organisational perspective, have continued some of that participation. They're leading on local activities still, and they're really embedding physical activity as part of their everyday life. And that helps us in terms of creating that behaviour change, because once we exit, Cami mentioned earlier on, we don't want to leave a void within those neighbourhoods. We want to see that they will continue to be active going forward, and putting together the capability, the opportunity and motivation supports that behaviour change, so they at individual levels can continue to be active throughout their lives. I think there was one more slide.
Oh, that was thank you. Yeah, really appreciated. That was a whistle-stop tour there at the end, which thank you for fitting that in. So finally, just to say, we have the Jump Resource Hub. We'll stick the link in the chat. I hope that was useful in understanding our neighbourhood approach and our co-design of local action plans. So I'll stop sharing there. Sorry, we have run over very slightly, but I'll hand back to Divine to see if we have any questions.
Thank you so much, Jan. Thank you, everyone. If you have any question, it's time now to ask question. You can write it in the chat or raise your hand. We can answer your questions.
Obviously, we've got our workshop following on from this session, so there'll be plenty of time to chat then. We've put an hour and a half in, but we'll probably be slightly less than that, and you're very welcome to just come for part of it if that suits.
Yes, the link is in the chat as well if you want to copy that and join for later on at 1 o'clock. I think we've got some. Oh, thank you, Charlotte. Charlotte said really useful session. Thank you.
I'll just stick I'm just putting the link to the resource hub in the chat as well. So as I say, if you need more support locally around this this work you're doing in your areas, you'll be interested to know more, please do contact me. I'll also stick my email in the chat now, and happy to stay in touch. My role now is about sharing learning and supporting other areas around working in a place-based whole system way to tackle inactivity. So happy to